Folks, thanks for joining us for another On the Limb podcast segment of Whitetail Weekly with Caleb Currents and Luke Humphreys. Take it away, guys.
All right, everyone. Let's see here. Thanks for the intro, Mike. So we're going to talk about the early season scouting that I like to do. Obviously, we're using onX. It's pretty much all we use. Here, I've kind of got some public land pulled up. But for those of you listening out there, if you're not very familiar with onX, please look into them. It's pretty much all we use here at Nature's Voice Game Calls. And I've used onX exclusively for probably 6 to 7 years, and they just really lead the way in the scouting technology. Over a digital platform, I can really tell a lot about a property before I even dive into it, and actually put boots on the ground. So what we're going to kind of talk about with this e-scouting series, I know that we talked pretty basic stuff there probably a week ago, and then the computer cut out on us. We were using the shop computer, but now I have my actual computer, so I can actually pull this stuff up for you guys so you can see. So for this early season scouting, there's 4 phases. We're going to break it up into early season. We're going to break it up into pre-rut, and then the rut, and then late season hunting. So, and how to scout, we're going to go over e-scouting, all of that stuff for it. So this is actually set up for the pre-rut. So we'll come back to this slide a little bit later. So what we're going to do is talk about early season. All right, so I don't hunt here. All right, but we're just going to pretend that I do. So we're just going to add a waypoint. And the big thing that we're going to look for is buck bedding and food close to buck bedding. Everyone always wonders why deer, disappear right going into bow season. They get super frustrated with it, but it's nothing too crazy. That deer, his food sources are just changing. Right? Pressure might have something to do with it as well, but typically that food source is changing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just drop a pin, we'll say in this low gap right here, right? We'll pretend that this is a food source of some type. It might be a mineral lick or whatever. But the biggest thing that you have to think about whenever you're scouting early season is, how am I going to get a good inventory? Right now, typically from the summer, that comes from running minerals, feed sites, things of that nature, maybe food plots, and having trail cameras on those. And then you see that buck starts to kind of change. He's not showing up as often. He's not showing up as frequently. I know I'm hunting a deer right now that is tending to do the same thing. So I've got to actually go put some boots on the ground for him this evening to actually scout, not to hunt, but I need to scout and kind of figure out and really dial in where I think that deer's bedding. So how do we do that, right? So the basic theory is you have that food source that deer was using, or is no longer using in the daylight, or whatever the case may be. It might turn from an everyday food source where he's there in the daylight to just a destination food source where that deer is only utilizing it at night. So what I like to do first off is I need to start figuring out, where is he coming from, right? Where is he bedding? If I'm his destination food source, where is he starting his journey from? Because he has to be moving in the daylight somewhere. And typically the answer is it's just extremely close to his bed, right? With oaks falling, what we run into is oaks start falling in, beginning of September, all the way into October. And, red oaks a few are still dropping, kind of late October, but most of the oaks on the ground by then. But regardless, as those oaks start to drop, those deer change their primary food source or their daily food source into oak that is typically closer to their bedroom, because they don't have to travel that far to get nutrition whenever they can literally eat oak in their bedroom from the safety of their own home. So that's kind of the way a big buck thinks. So we've got this food source right here, right? Now we're just going to kind of talk about places where I would start probing cameras, or where I would anticipate a buck to bed. Now, typically the way the wind works in the state of West Virginia and Ohio as well, but really West Virginia, is the wind typically comes from the northwest. All right, so we're just going to draw an arrow from our... Okay, yeah, we're going to draw an arrow for the wind direction right here. Okay, so that's the way the wind's coming. Here's our food source with our stand or whatever. You might be asking yourself, where is this deer coming from? I have no idea. So places I'm going to start looking are leeward hillsides, right? Just naturally, bucks like to bed on leeward hillsides. Typically, depending on access, if access is low, like this road right here, bucks are going to bed typically on the upper third, right? Now, some bucks will bed kind of right over the road, kind of an overlooked spot. Some bucks kind of want to be way out, maybe on one of these points. Right, but then again, they've got access from the lake that they may not like. So this is just an example, but think about that, where your access is. Bucks will typically bed a little bit lower and a little bit further out away from roads if they can get it, in some thicker stuff if access is high. But if it's from, low and it's steep country like this, bucks will typically just stick to bedding on that upper third. So potential buck beds is the first thing that I'll mark, right? Where do I think the deer's coming from? Where could he be coming from? Where it makes sense, right? Just based off of his bed. So we're just going to mark these pins here with some spots that I am going to walk in and look for buck sign. I'm looking for fresh oak stropping, deer sign in general. It doesn't have to just be buck sign. All right, and what kind of makes sense? Now, this is a very small scale. This is probably only, 1,000 yards, right? But it might be smaller than this. It might be bigger than this, depending on, where you're hunting and what that deer likes to do. So like right here, this buck might be bedding out off the end of this point. All right, now typically, bucks like to bed with the wind at their back. Like I said, there's leeward hillsides. They can smell everything behind them. And that deer likes to look over and see everything in front of him, right? That is his goal. He wants to be able to see everything kind of like this in a fan down below him. So here's where he's bedding. This is what he's seeing, right? And he's got the wind coming over his back this direction so he can smell. So the deer is he's pretty hard to get to. What you have to do is you have to go and scout and set cameras, and I like to set mock scrapes or set cameras on heavy trail intersections in between where I think he might be bedding and this food source. At this food source, whether it be a feeder, a food plot, whatever, you need to set that camera to video mode. That will tell you a lot more about that deer than you realize. It'll give you a lot better of an azimuth on where he's coming from. So if you use that video mode, and we'll say that we know that he's coming, he's coming from this is in a low gap, he's coming from around this hillside. He's coming from here. All right, so now I have a general direction on how I want to start setting my cameras. So I'm going to start gridding cameras, maybe here, maybe here, maybe here, and I'm going to scatter those cameras all the way across through here, maybe one in this low gap, right? I'm going to scatter those cameras, and it doesn't have to be far, right? If you start with, 50 to 100 yards between each camera, that's huge, because if you link 4 cameras together and you put 50 yards between each of them, you're covering 200 yards. That's a lot of hillside and a lot of hill country that you can cut between you and that whitetail to kind of try and find where he's bedding. So we'll say that we've ran cameras and we know that he's somewhere out on this point, right? We'll say it's one of these 2 beds is kind of what we've narrowed it down to. Well, then I want to think about oaks and what oaks are hitting there, right? So there might be a patch of oaks hitting right on this little point that this deer is using in the daylight, or maybe there's oaks hitting in this small, it's kind of a bowl is what I like to call it, that deer is feeding on. So then you just have to set up access to it. So we'll just say, for this instance, that there are oaks here on this little point right there. All right, and we'll say that we think he's using this bed. So now we kind of know where we want to hunt. The issue is the wind. We're not going to be able to come straight from above and then drop down. We might be able to, but then again, that deer, we're kind of playing playing a fine line with the wind. So access-wise, preferably what I like to do is hunt evenings in the early season. And what I'll try and do is I'll actually slip down this hillside probably to access it, and then come in from here, and then come set right on the edge of this. All right, I want to set up on the bottom side, so that way my thermals are going to drop down into this drain and go out over the lake and over the water, and that deer never really crosses my trail if he stays high. So he can feed through those oaks and hopefully give me an opportunity. So bottom line, guys, those buck trends, they're switching from that summer pattern. They're focusing on oak, and it's going to be near their bed. That's the thing. There's no such thing as an October lull. Deer have to feed 5 times a day. It's not like they stopped doing that in October. They just feed closer to their bed. So use those cameras, and whenever your food site, your mineral blocks or whatever the case may be, whenever that turns into a destination food source and that deer starts showing up at 11 o'clock and midnight instead of 5 p.m. and 8 a.m. or whatever, that's when I start dialing it back. Go find where that buck's bedding, work, and just grid cameras out, and then set up on oak as close as you can to it, right? And then watch your access, watch your wind, be careful when you'll get them killed.
This episode of On the Limb Podcast with Nature's Voice Game Calls is brought to you by Faith Builders, LLC. Faith Builders, LLC is a Christian-owned and operated West Virginia construction company. Faith Builders is a shingle master through Certainteed Shingles. Faith Builders offers a 50-year non-prorated warranty. In addition to pitched roofs, Faith Builders also specializes in low-slope roofing for both commercial and residential, currently certified through Mule Hide Roofing Products. Give them a call today at 304-916-3033 and 304-474-3096, or visit them on their Facebook page. Faith Builders LLC, brightening up the world one job at a time. 304-916-3033.